Bloomberg Money.
Good noon, everyone. Bloomberg Money on a Friday. Personal finance, retirement, some kind of wealth management. After this week, wealth management's a challenge, to say the least.
Wealth management is a challenge if you're a bond investor, certainly, because you were thrown for a complete loop.
Let's do our last moment of Bloomberg TV, because it is Bloomberg Money. To 4 digits, the 30-year bond yields of 5.2688. That's stressful.
It's moving up when the Trump administration wants to see it moving
Great.
down.
Fu nailing it. Price up, yield down, or yield up, price down. That's our last Bloomberg chat for the day, because it is about, again, personal finance, retirement, and wealth management. We have wonderful conversations today. Rebecca Patterson will be with us, yes, with the Council on Foreign Relations, but in the trenches experiment with Bessemer Trust on wealth management. Really looking forward to this, given the turmoil that we've seen.
You almost said Bessemer, and I understand why, because of the turmoil in the bond market. We're also going to speak with Kevin Gordon, head of macro research and strategy at Charles Schwab. The wacky week in Treasuries, has it spilled over into equities? Does it change how you invest for the long term?
Coming in the door this morning, I had no idea what markets would do. Red, green, there we are. We've got a nice lift to it. Right now, I'd say it's a little bit more than a Friday lift to the market, a summertime lift. No, it's more than that. The Dow up 400 points, and the VIX coming in. I don't think we get to a 14 print in the VIX, but nevertheless, it's a nice lift on a summertime Friday.
Still, the S&P 500 is set to finish the week down about 1.2%, and we talk about the wackadoo week for the U.S. bond market. The 30-year yield started the week at a 2007 high. It's come down, but it is still higher than where it was yesterday. The dollar not doing much of anything. Oil prices also not really moving today.
Great lineup today of Bloomberg people linked into the markets today. Nikki Waller joins us, driving all of our personal finance coverage. It seems like every day there's a germane story out there really to lean into. David Gura, Bloomberg This Weekend, program note, Tom Keene will appear with David Gura on Sunday. I'm coming in on Sunday. Jackson Hole preview. It's too much.
Oh, my gosh.
My people located about an hour ago.
Okay.
And joining us, we're thrilled to bring you Sarah Frier, driving so much of our technology coverage. She changed the dialogue on social media a few years ago. She figured out Instagram before anybody else. Her book, just hugely, hugely successful. If you wrote your book today, how would it be different?
Well, so much is changing about the way we consume information. I feel like the biggest change for all of us is that it's become a more passive experience, that when we look at our devices and we go on, we may not have an idea of what we want to find.
Right.
We're being told what we should find. And the critical thinking is out of the equation.
Okay, I feel that way every day, but on No Filter, AI is our new filter, right?
It is. It's making decisions for us on what we should care about, how we should think about it. And that takes away the decision making on our parts about what we want to know, why we walked into using our phones in the first place. So I think that's the moment we're in, where we need to really think about what we're trying to accomplish when we use our technology. And probably if I were to revisit it, I'd look into that.
France, they tried to ban social media in France.
Can you do that, though? Does that actually work?
No, the judges, the courts.
But what are kids going to do? If social media is banned, they're going to talk to their chatbots. You think they're going to go play outside?
Or they could hang out.
They could hang out.
They could actually have a conversation with their
parents.
Make a note. Can I pencil you in for a conversation Wednesday?
Exactly.
That's the way it is.
Well, let's stick with this tech theme a little bit here, David Gura, because technology is coming up as an issue in the midterm elections. Data centers comes up a lot, and it seems like voters hate data centers, whether you're on the left or the right, and the politicians, the elected officials, are picking up on that as we head towards the midterm.
Yeah, fascinating note by Michael Hartnett last week from Bank of America. He, of course, coined the Magnificent Seven moniker, but he wrote about the prospects for there being a longer-lasting bubble, depending on how the election results in Texas turn out. So Greg Abbott, of course, very pro-data centers. We've seen a lot of them crop up more in the works in Texas. Michael Hartnett and his team saying, were he to be elected, that would extend the life of the cycle that we're in right now. But you're absolutely right. This is something that I think is galvanizing a lot of people. the prospects of these things being in their backyards is something that's really agitating a lot of
Right, because these data centers supposedly bring about higher utility bills, water bills, electricity bills. They're noisy. Maybe they cause cancer.
And not a lot of jobs after the initial construction of them.
Are we really
right.
saying they cause cancer?
No, but there's a lot of talk on social media, and I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but this is kind of the conversation. David, just stay with the midterms for a minute, because there's been some primaries, and I wonder what the takeaway is, because you have Donald Trump's Republicans versus what feels like increasingly unmoored Democrats.
Yeah, although I think that the Democratic Party is kind of coalescing here. There's a little bit of agitation at the beginning here. Is there going to be this split within the Democratic Party? I think that narrative has kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit. But I'm watching President Trump making his way to South Carolina today to campaign for the late Lindsey Graham's sister. And there's going to be a parade of other kind of Republican dignitaries with him. I now think that the split that I'm looking at is within the Republican Party. Those who have sided with President Trump, often at their own peril, now having to make the case for his policies when it seems like there isn't a whole lot there on
20 seconds. I got to get to Ms. Waller. 20 seconds. Does the far left want America to create wealth?
Yes, I think, but wants that wealth to be more widely shared. And so I think, look, the economy is doing relatively well by many measures, but the way that it's distributed is something that I think that they care
Okay,
an awful lot about.
we're going back to normal Bloomberg coverage. The 30-year bond is coming up. My God, Nikki, what does this new Besant yield mean for our personal finance? There's got to be a seismic shift this week.
Well, you know, I think bonds used to be pretty drama-free, and the game board is changing for investors right now. I think one way to simplify and think about it is if you need money, it is going to be more expensive to get that money. If you have money, there are a lot more interesting places you might be able to put it.
Oh, that's a really good way of putting it. What I find fascinating, too, is that it's one thing for Bloomberg to fixate on the Treasury market. But you have CNN and you have other mainstream publications now featuring the 30-year bond yield on their screens right now. People are talking about it in a way that feels like it's alarming. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, given that the 30-year bond yield has been at 2007 levels for a couple of weeks now, but it's entering the conversation in a new way.
That's absolutely right. This week it feels like something has boiled over, and even if things do calm down next week, I think we're in for a longer period of uncertainty, which is the theme we come to over and over again with politics, with tech, and everything.
One of our interns just brought this in. Let's bring it up right now. This is either the expense at the Gura household at camp this summer, or it's the U.S. debt clock. Did you get out to 39 trillion point nine, David Gura, this camp?
We're not there yet, but the compounding facet of having so many camp payments to make is getting us somewhere near. Although it looks better in red, I think, when I look at it.
We've been through this 14 times, the three of you as well. The fact is, fiscal policy doesn't matter in a voting booth, does it?
I think that people are getting more and more concerned about it. I think that the follow-on is the thing that we haven't seen yet. So we've had Republicans and Democrats talk about the fiscal situation, as you say, for many cycles here. But there's no coherent plan for what to do with it. And I think that's what we're seeing kind of manifest.
How are you going to approach this next week with your team of 400? Oh, wait, they're all on vacation. Your team of three.
Everybody's out, so we'll just be there scrivening, me and you, Tom. But, you know, I think to your point, one of the interesting things is that the Trump administration is, with Besant's moves, is taking steps to try to bring down costs for people, whether it's borrowing costs for mortgages, and the market is pushing them right back.
I got to get this in. We celebrate Sarah Frier coming back to the East Coast as well. Are you the last person leaving California? This billionaires, I mean, come on, you know all these fancy people. Are they really all going to go down to Austin?
You know, the core of the tech industry is still there. We've seen a lot of people try to make Miami happen, try to make, you know, Austin happen. They all come back at some point to California. The reason I'm here, though, is because, you know, sort of akin to what you all are talking about, the tech story and how it's intertwined with the economy, how it's intertwined with politics, and you know, the future of the whole system. A lot of it has to be a conversation among all of us here at Bloomberg, and it's really, I think, part of why people are so against data centers is because they're seeing the stock market and they're seeing the wealth creation and they're not feeling it. They're seeing data centers as the symbol of how tech companies are spending billions and how it's not coming into their pocket. Instead, it's driving their bills up. It's you know, even just like memory chips, for instance, are harder to get, so their phones are more expensive. This is all playing into the anxiety we're seeing around the midterms.
This has been wonderful. Nikki, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Sarah, thrilled that you're back with us. Mr. Gurr, I'll see you Sunday.
You're on for 2 hours.
8 to 9.
Yeah.
I'm on 2. With Tony Crescenzi.
Don't be
not
late.
bad.
There will be bagels.
To Global Wall Street, Anthony Crescenzi on Bloomberg this weekend is really, really something. He's truly a giant of the fixed income market. And I believe Nikki Waller will attend, or,
We're going to talk to her people after this.
We'll see as well. Coming up, this is an important conversation. Rebecca Patterson, for years driving wealth management at Bessemer Trust. Of course, you know her from Bridgewater. Rebecca Patterson on the turmoil in the markets and your long-term plan. From New York City, Bloomberg Money.
That was a new surprise, right? You're
I
coming
don't
in
think
this
she is coming.
weekend?
Are you coming on?
I got a 15
No.
They were in my ear.
Oh, my God. Sorry.
Good Friday afternoon, Bloomberg Money, Scarlet, Fu, and Tom King. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's get right to it. Kevin Gordon with us later, but now Rebecca Patterson, the fancy title, Writing Daily. Great work with Sebastian Mallaby, Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. I don't care because it's Bloomberg Money. Wonderful to have you here.
Great to be here.
Long ago and far away at Bessemer Trust, I came in and I said, wonderful pontification to wealth management people. If you were at Bessemer Trust today, how do you handle this bond market?
I would have been nervous about bonds for some time. I wrote an op-ed in the New York Times in January last year expressing some concern about longer-term bonds because the policies we were getting were going to increase the deficit, increase growth, which is a good thing, but push up inflation, therefore likely higher rates. So this isn't a surprise what's happening. I think the surprise this week is now we have volatility in those rates thanks to the Treasury. So I would prefer to be in cash or short-term fixed income and other types of diversifiers, dare I say it, gold.
Here's the canard of the business folks. Bring up the chart, please. This is for Rebecca Patterson. Wall Street and Rebecca Patterson talk differently than mere mortals. If you own the TLTs out 20 years plus, like a lot of retail does, picking up that yield, it's priced down. From COVID, it has been a crater of yield up, price down. In your world, what's long term? 7-year duration, not 20-year, when you're looking at retirement and wealth management.
Yeah, I think even shorter duration, like money markets right now. So the yield pickup you have by owning a longer term bond right now, yes, you get something for it, but is it worth the risk? And right now, I haven't thought it is. What I would say, though, is for retail investors, if you lose money when rates going up, it does depend on how fast the rates go up, and it depends what the yield is. So if I'm getting a high yield, say the 30-year, it's 5.24%, and yields continue higher but very slowly, I lose money as the prices fall and the yields go up, but I'm making money on that coupon. So it depends how quickly this move happens from here.
They get the envelope at home. I'm sorry. They get the envelope at home, and $100,000 has become $97,238. And then for your wealth management, the next month it's $95,800. Wall Street rationalizes. In the Bloomberg Money world, folks, you're looking at yield up, price down.
Right. So the rate of change is what you're saying you're focused on.
Correct.
When we look at the volatility in the bond market, and you can see it certainly this week.
Yes.
Does it feel like the U.S. bond market is increasingly looking like a developing market as opposed to a developed market?
A little bit, yes.
I mean, if I wanted this kind of volatility, I'd go and invest in another country's bonds, not the U.S.
Well, the irony today is that a number of emerging financial markets have done better than the U.S. market in stocks and bonds this year. And some of that is fundamentals, and some of it is just point in time and what those economies are doing. If I'm Korea or Taiwan and I'm doing a lot of AI, that's obviously helped me. If I'm another country and I'm doing a lot of commodity exports, maybe that would have helped me. But I hear you. The point is that with our debt to GDP in the United States running around 100% and poised to go towards 120 over the next decade, and questions around who's buying the bonds and what yield they need to buy them, it makes things a little more tenuous.
You say we need to watch the U.S. dollar because
Yes.
it'll suffer if the U.S. Treasury under Scott Bessent can bring down yields. If you're an American living abroad, you certainly feel the effects of the dollar's strength and weaknesses, all the swings.
Yep.
And I feel affected if I'm traveling abroad, but not if I'm sitting here in New York for weeks on end.
Right. No.
Or am I misunderstanding that?
100%. If you're an American, you live in dollars, you get paid in dollars, you spend dollars, the only way you're going to feel that exchange rate movement is what it does to inflation and what it does to financial conditions. And what I mean by that is when you have a weaker dollar, basically it tends to push up inflation in the U.S. And at the margin, that might make it more likely that the Federal Reserve thinks it needs to raise interest rates.
Do you predict a weaker dollar?
I'm more in kind of the range camp right now. So I don't think the dollar's about to fall off a cliff.
We
No.
just brought up the Gura Camp bill for this summer. Let's bring it up again. I was a mistake. It's Bloomberg Money correction here, folks. This is the U.S. debt clock popping out at $40 trillion. You and I were weaned on Paul Tsongas, Sam Nunn, Pete Peterson, and the rest.
These people?
Every year, cry wolf, cry wolf, cry wolf. In my retirement, in my wealth management study, is it time to stop crying wolf?
I think there's two things that are different today. One is simply the size of the debt. And the fact that so that's one thing. The second thing is that neither the public nor the politicians are willing to turn the corner on fiscal policy. Americans since 2008 have been conditioned to think the government's going to come to their rescue anytime there's a problem. And politicians trying to hold on to their seats. Fiscal austerity doesn't get you reelected. And so it's just been this self-fulfilling thing where every government, both parties, keep increasing that deficit, which pushes up that debt clock. So something has to give. We need politicians to be honest with voters and say we need to have fiscal austerity, and we need voters to accept that to have a stronger financial market and economy, there is a price.
So when you say something has to give, what does that look like, and how will people feel it?
Well, if it is fiscal austerity, more spending cuts, which are harder to do, or tax hikes, and we'll see who pays those tax hikes. That's a question mark. If it's not that, and politically that's not likely anytime soon, then we have to get something else happening. And my fear, and I'm not calling for a crisis, but my fear is this happens in an ugly way that forces the austerity. And that could come from a few things. It could come here at home. Let's say there's a catalyst that pulls down sentiment towards artificial intelligence, AI stocks. It's not just an AI stock trade anymore. It's AI stocks, AI debt. Everything comes down.
The entire stock market, the entire corporate bond market.
And globally now, right? AI is in a lot of different markets. So that's one risk. I think a second risk is if inflation's sticky, the Fed has to raise rates higher than expected. Right. That could be another catalyst. And don't forget overseas. You might be spending and living in dollars, but if France has a debt crisis, we will have contagion here in the U.S.
I'm sorry, I didn't research this. The interns have all gone back to school. Are you on a task force? Are you on
one of the Fed task force? No, one of Warsh's 5 task forces.
Lucky you, you're not on. What would you do on a retirement task force right now? What would be goal one?
A retirement task force.
Social Security task force, Rebecca Patterson.
Social Security task force. We have to raise the age where you start getting benefits from Social Security. People live longer.
100% agree. We also, the rich people have to put in more.
We could do some means testing. I don't mind contributing to Social Security. I shouldn't get any. I'll live fine without it. I would rather have my money going to help people who need it more, and therefore we don't have a financial crisis.
I'm not sure that's a popular opinion.
None of these are popular opinions, which is why it hasn't been addressed.
Since she's not doing popular opinions, does she come back or not? I can't
yes,
remember.
we need to have her back.
Okay.
I would like to come back. Please have me back.
All right, Rebecca Patterson from the Council on Foreign Relations. She will be sticking with us, but we're going to talk some more personal finance, get Rebecca's take on how she manages her personal finance. This is Bloomberg Money.
Task force. I'm not.
You weren't invited?
I was not invited.
You were not invited.
That's for sure.
You're so sad about that.
Bloomberg Money, a perfect Friday in New York City. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Are you working all next week? Or I
am working all next week, but I have to work doubly hard because it feels like no one's in the office.
No one's in the office. I mean,
and the bond market keeps going crazy. So.
The thing used to be quiet. It's not quiet anymore. What's not going to be quiet is November. Rebecca Patterson with a book come November, Investment Wisdom for Our Friends and Loved Ones. We are the first people to talk about
I know. I
this.
feel like we're getting a sneak preview of all this. So, Rebecca, because of that, and you're going to come back once the book is published,
Of course.
I want to get a sense of your personal investment approach. How do you do things? Are you kind of a set it and forget it person, or are you constantly making changes based on conditions?
I'm not a trader. And when I say that, I mean people who like to figure out what to buy and sell daily or even hourly. I'm an investor. So I'm saying, what are my retirement goals? What money do I need along the way for kids' weddings, down payments for homes, et cetera? And then figuring out my asset allocation. Partly because I've been living in this world for 30 years, I'm comfortable making some tactical tilts in my portfolio along the way, whether I'm leaning a little harder into equities or out or towards a certain country or a sector. But I'd say those are at the margin, because I think for most people, they get emotional.
Yeah.
They think they need to time it. Oh my gosh, the market's frothy. There's a bubble. I want to get out. It's really unusual that people can time getting out and then back in well.
So you have to time it twice.
You're better off just figure out what makes sense for you personally and then let it go.
Is there anything that's off limits to you when you look at all the possible investments out there?
I am agnostic about crypto. If other people want to trade it, God bless. It's not for me. I don't like that you can't determine a fair value. I don't like that there are so many idiosyncratic drivers around it. However, I will fully admit, if you bought it in 2012 and held it to today, you'd be extremely happy.
All right, Rebecca, such a pleasure to have you here.
Great to
Thank
have
you so
you.
much.
Thanks.
Rebecca Patterson, Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, formerly with Bessemer Trust. Coming up on Bloomberg Money, we continue our conversation with Kevin Gordon, Head of Macro Research and Strategy at Charles Schwab, to discuss how rising oil prices and bond market swings are hitting your savings. This is Bloomberg Money. Investment
He takes no
wisdom.
vacation. Gordon's a trooper. Bloomberg Money. Good afternoon. It's a Friday. I thought it'd be a sleepy August Friday. It's not. Equities interesting. Oil interesting. Scarlet bonds. I'm aging as we go.
I know. Well, bonds are kind of boring today, but they've been super crazy this week.
The yield's nudging up. I mean, anybody with a 60-40 portfolio is going to be,
Yep.
60-30. Let's look at the stock market right now. Dow up 400 points. It's the way we roll, green on the screen. The VIX is a 15.31 as well. That's pretty good given the festivities of the week.
The festivities. All right, let's take a look at the bond market now, because yields are higher, as you mentioned, and it's not what the Trump administration wants to see.
Look at the
they've been
10-year
pushing
yield.
against that. The 10-year yield, you can see 4.7% right there. Oil prices not doing anything, dollar not doing anything at the moment.
We'll have to see on that.
Well, we'll see what happens next week. Bloomberg Money is your new destination for personal finance. It's a cross-platform effort that extends beyond your television screen, including our new digital hub at Bloomberg.com/money. And Tom, this story really got my attention. You know about gap years.
No.
Yes. Well, we both have firsthand experience with this, but for a certain cohort of families, there's a $95,000 gap year program.
It's just the rich people.
It is a rich people story, and
It's
it
the upper
includes
1%.
bungee jumping near Victoria Falls in Southern Africa, visiting a Brazilian bank, coding an app. Bloomberg's Sarah Foster wrote about this for the Money team, and she joins us now. This is more than just getting some experience and maturing into your college experience, isn't it?
It used to be this perception that gap years were kind of this like laissez-faire. I'm gonna follow around fish. Maybe generation before that, the Grateful Dead. Maybe I'll work on a ranch. Now it seems like parents are really using these highly facilitated, tightly scheduled gap years to make sure they're exposing their children to people that they might be able to get help from when they start to graduate and look for a job. I heard from some parents here who actually, they kind of attribute the value of someone found an internship through a connection that he made while meeting someone on one of these gap year programs. So it's like those qualitative kind of career-focused, goals that I
It's
think a lot
about
of people
beefing up
have
your
from them.
resume before you even start college, so that when you get to college, you can focus on the extracurricular activities that gets you the network to get the job.
It's true. I was also speaking with another gap year student who did a semester-long program, and then he paired it with an internship that pushed back his graduation date. he was saying that he was doing research for an MBA program with his mom and noticed that a lot of people who were in this MBA program that he wanted to apply for, they did the same kind of gap year program. So he was kind of also using it as a way to get into one of those schools.
These people are such strivers. I mean, I know Kevin Gordon at Schwab. He was a lifeguard when he was at Pepperdine, making like $6 an hour.
Well, maybe in 2026 is a different story. Of course, you have to be able to afford this, and it's also very competitive as well. Another story that you wrote about, which really got our attention, is about millennials and how they're feeling pretty good. There was a survey that found that their financial situation has improved from 5 years ago, more than, say, for Gen X or the baby boomers.
Nearly half of them feel like they've gotten better, which is a greater share of them than Gen Xers and baby boomers. I was speaking with a researcher, and we kind of came to this conclusion that millennials might actually just be late bloomers. It's right around the time when they start to turn 30, which I turned 30 this year. The youngest millennials are hitting that new decade where
30.
their incomes, are finally hitting those peak years. They're in dual income households soon. They're finally able to kind of catch up on those goals, and you see that their net worth is pulling away from, baby boomers at a faster pace. But
aren't their debt levels also rising faster than others? I mean, they just have more debt in general, too.
That's the other side of the story here. So even though these younger generations might have more equity exposure, which is helping them pull away at a faster pace, they also have more consumer debt. And we excluded mortgages debt when we were looking at this. So when we say consumer debt, we're including things like credit cards, student loans.
That chart is frightening.
I think student loans is a big one, especially given how much tuition has increased. Sarah, thank you so much. Sarah Foster with some incredible stories.
She's on like weekly.
She is.
It's like too much.
I insisted.
She's that good. Sarah Foster, thank you so much. It's a perfect segue into Kevin Gordon. He's had a macro research and strategy at Charles Schwab. And, I look at this, and as far as I can see with personal finance in distant retirement, the younger crew, which you're arguably the voice on Wall Street, the younger crew takes us a lot more seriously than I did when I was 30 at the Wobbly Barn way up in Vermont.
Yes, it is a definitive shift. I thought that
huge
piece
shift.
was fascinating because, I sit at such an interesting nexus. You sort of talk about me being the younger voice on this. All day I'm in the Wall Street world for work, but then I live in the Gen Z world. I'm cuspy, but I'm technically Gen Z still. I'm on the edge of it.
It's a new word.
Older Gen Z, younger millennial.
I'm
exactly.
Cuspy.
Okay.
I'm cuspy.
But this whole idea around, you see it survey after survey, anecdote after anecdote, but younger people today, especially in Gen Z, they just don't really believe in that classic American dream of a house being a wealth generator. So they have shifted a lot to the stock market, but that has really important implications for how they think about saving and how they think about building wealth over time. Not, better or worse than what it was before. It's just a different environment than what we've had.
They think about income generation through these like fancy ETFs that cost a lot of money, but also I guess when it works, but it feels like there's a lot of risk-taking involved that they may not be aware of.
Yes, there has been a blurring of this sort of investing versus gambling kind of mindset over the past several years. I would sort of date it back, I guess, to 2021 when a lot of people were treating that meme stock craze as this new way to wealth. But obviously that ended pretty poorly.
I want to interrupt you. This is too important. Your colleague Liz Ann Saunders is leading the way on this.
Yes.
She is the #1 voice in the racket over
gambling
this gambling and what it means for kids. In your milieu, when you're a hipster and you're out on the weekend and all that, how pervasive is the gambling?
Oh, it's incredibly pervasive. I mean, because it's all in front of us all the time. We all see the stats on screen time and how much people are buried in their phones, and it gets larger and larger percentage-wise when you go down the generations.
Do they understand they're losing money? Is anybody making money?
I don't know if the statistics on gambling versus investing are definitive in terms of how much money the average person loses for the former. So investing over the long term is statistically and empirically it's the better way to sort of build wealth. But I think also what has sort of taken hold, and this was sort of embedded, I think, a little bit in the story that you were discussing earlier, is that we have, because of housing being so much at the center of how people view wealth building now, and the fact that housing is frozen for a huge chunk of younger people, out of reach. We have been living in what has been called this little treat economy, where people are treating themselves to smaller things, not necessarily thinking about saving for a big down payment or a big purchase, not painting that across the board for millennials, but that is increasingly becoming the norm and the feeling, and hence why you see also a lot more money being put into the stock market. So again, it's not necessarily an outright bad thing. It's just different in how people are treating their wealth.
I mean, this source of demand for equities kind of continues unabated. If people are treating gambling as investing when they really want to go to something safe, what is that safe thing?
Well, I would argue that any sort of tried and true and tested asset class, whether it's the bond market, whether it's the stock market, those traditional asset classes have sort of proven their worth over time.
Are millennials investing in bonds?
I wouldn't say that the interest is there yet, especially when I speak to them. I think that that's still maybe a more of a kind of enigma and a little bit of a black box in terms of the dynamics of the bond market.
To us as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, to me, I'm a stock market person, so the bond market to me is still an enigma. But I think when you start to look into the mechanics and the maths of the bond market, especially this week. When I have people now texting me about bonds, that's when things are really getting out into the mainstream and getting very, very interesting. But I still think that from that sort of coupon perspective and that yield perspective, we've been in the camp that the bond backdrop is favorable. Maybe not necessarily out to the long end in the 10-year, but if you're focusing sort of right below duration, which is where our guidance is right now.
I love this is brilliant, Kevin, this banner that we've got up now, Young Americans Living in the Treat Economy. That's absolutely brilliant. Let's bring this up, the writings of Kevin Gordon. He's been writing all summer because Liz Ann took the summer off. The S&P 500 up marginally, yet breadth improving, perhaps emphasized most by the fact equal weighted S&P up 8.9%, Mag 7 down the tubes. So we're learning again about rotation in that. Yes. Bring it back to retirement. If I'm in those ugly middle years where I'm thinking about retirement, I'm scared stiff, I won't have enough money, but I'm paralyzed, I can't do anything. 45, 50, 55 years old, what's the path given this new breadth?
Well, the breadth of the market, I think, and what you've learned over the past several years, because we've been in, I would argue, this multi-year rotation process, not necessarily outside of the Mag 7 where those companies just aren't going to be good performers, but we often find that there's this conflating, and you run into this, where people think just because they're the largest companies, they're going to be the best performers in the market. That was the case several years ago, but that hasn't been the case in the past several years. So I think that, notably 24, 25, that's when you started to see more of a definitive shift. So the fact that they could still be up this year or up over the past year, that's true, but they're sort of ceding leadership to a lot of other parts of the market that have been asleep for a good chunk of this bull market. Yeah. Small caps is sort of the poster child of that. So I think in a rotational market where you've got north of 70% of companies in the S&P 500 that are trading above their 200-day moving average, that is much more consistent with rotational markets where leadership can change over time, and it's not necessarily portending, some massive drop in the market. Very different backdrop than late 2021, which I think is an important analog, because that's when things started to get way too top-heavy. Breadth under the surface was deteriorating, and then you ultimately had the bear market in 22.
I want to go back to what you said about the treat economy and how people are feeling that they want to treat themselves a little bit because the big things are so out of reach. The flip side of that is that phenomenon of FIRE, right? Financial independence and retire early. Invest really aggressively. Deny yourself everything for now so that by, 30 or 40 or 50, you can retire and go live your best life. How much does that come up in your conversations with this generation of investors?
Comes up a lot. I have a lot of discussions with individuals who, whether it's in a friend capacity and they're just letting me know their experience, or if it's at a client event and someone tells me about whether it's themselves or if it's their child or grandchild. I think the concept around labor in the U.S. and how that has changed, how you can have a lot more sources of supplemental income these days. Again, survey after survey showing that younger people think that content creator is sort of rising up the list of potential. For a job and for a full-time job. Not that that's going to be the dominant job. It's not that I'm, predicting that, but that's becoming more of a sort of a sentiment in the U.S. amongst the younger crowd, is that with the FIRE movement, but also having different streams of income, not necessarily relying only on one income stream from one job necessarily.
At 40,000 billion, folks, I speak like the English here. Instead of 40 trillion, it's 40,000 billion. Bring up the debt clock again. On Bloomberg Money today, it's a debt clock hat trick. We brought it up.
How many commas is that?
It's like 40 billion and counting and all that. Do the young kids care about the debt, or is that just, Liz Ann was wonderful on this, and I think the younger Bush administration, do we care about the debt if we're young Turks?
I would say, in general, the younger generation, I don't hear about the debt maybe ever. I think that for some of these numbers, whether it's the debt, whether it is some of this issuance in the bond market, whether it is everything related to AI and the investments that you're seeing, some of these numbers are just so large. I think that the mind can't really comprehend them. I was sitting in a strategy meeting this morning, and someone was saying, and I'm going to fudge the numbers and not remember them.
But it doesn't matter because they're big.
Numbers. But someone was saying, 1 trillion seconds. If you think about it in timing, 1 trillion seconds is, some decades ago in terms of years. So, you compound that to 40, or you sort of multiply that to 40, and it kind of puts into context how big these numbers are and how we really can't sort of fathom them. So I don't blame people for maybe shying away from wanting to approach that topic, but at the same time, again, we've been living with such large debt piles and large deficits for so long. I think also part of this is it has become a bit of the new norm. Not that I'm endorsing it, but when you have both sides that really don't seemingly want to do anything about it, and it becomes just this norm, that's what happens.
12 seconds. Yeah, is the glass half full or glass half empty right now as you write for the weekend?
Glass half full.
There you go. You can come back. Kevin Gordon, thank you. With Charles Schwab. Can't say enough about that. Thank you for the response and the videos that we get out on the weekend, what Scarlet and I are doing on LinkedIn and Twitter. Really, really, really appreciate that.
All right, coming up on Bloomberg Money, more Americans are spending on hobbies. We talk about the treat economy. This is a perfect example. We're going to take a closer look at what's going on there. The numbers bear it out. This is Bloomberg Money. What's your hobby?
My hobby is going to work.
Same.
Not fun. Kevin Gordon was just telling us about the treat economy. There's data from PNC, credit card data, that show year-over-year growth in hobby spending in every month since April of 2025. And this increase in the past year is outpacing discretionary purchases overall. And guess what? It spans across all generations, from Tom Keene's baby boomers to the youngest Gen Zers. And what it suggests is that consumers are making more room for their pastimes in their budget. Bloomberg's Julia Fanzaris joins us now to discuss. I mean, sometimes they're not saving as much in order to spend on treats for themselves.
Absolutely. Personal savings are at a 4-year low right now. And people are saying, at a time where everything's very expensive and you want to be happy, we're going to spend a lot and splurge on these hobbies.
What kind of hobbies are we talking about? I mean, there's making music, playing sports. I mean, these are not big budget items, or are they?
Well, the funny thing about hobbies is sometimes when you start it, it's a very low entryway, but when you get very into it, that's when it gets expensive. So we chatted with people who, they started off buying sticker sheets. Now they're spending $300 a month on stickers. Yes, to do junk journaling.
On what?
On stickers. Can you believe it?
Stickers?
Like stickers, just what you put in a scrapbook.
My mother called those green stamps, and she could buy, cheap china with it.
Well, she wasn't spending $300 a month on it.
But in the old days, we had time for hobbies. Like somebody had a 48-foot Hinkley Bermuda, or you play golf 3 times a week. We're not doing that anymore, are we?
I feel like the pandemic has pushed people to get back into spending time with themselves and going back to these hobbies. I actually spoke to someone who said they're back into golf because their coworkers were golfing and he's golfing with his friends, and now he got his own personal $650 Callaway driver.
Okay, so stickers, also crafting. You talk to companies that really cater to people's hobbies, like Michael's, and they confirm that this is a real thing.
That's what was fascinating. Michael's CEO was saying, the really amazing thing about this is it's generational, as you mentioned. People are spending more and more, and it's just not just, I'm buying like $10 here and there. They're making large purchases. I was telling Tom earlier, I bought a $200 sewing machine because I wanted to get back into sewing. It has not been so lucrative because I did want to save on hemming, and I've had to fix a lot of those, but it's still very fun. And
is there like a modern AI tech sewing machine, or is it just a standard Singer thing?
It's a standard Singer heavy duty. It is a standard Singer heavy duty. Very low tech.
What color?
Gray, unfortunately. They didn't have the pink.
Industrial. Didn't have the pink.
They didn't.
Boosting the economy. Boosting the economy.
We're going to go to books. Thank you so much for your comments on what Scarlet
Books is also a way to spend on your hobby.
Books is part of it as well. We're going to do Paris here because Julia darkened the door at Sciences Po a few years ago. My book on Paris, and this is a required read, David McCullough, I just simply can't say enough about it. The Greater Journey. This book is so strong about the arc from the 1830s, 40s through regimes, commune, all the challenges of Paris. You're angry when the book ends. It's a required read for every expat brat going to Paris, particularly if they go to Sciences Po and hang out at the Moose Bar.
Who are your referring to?
I would know who that would be.
Who could that possibly be?
Oh, Julia, you spent time in Paris. I don't know if you read this book, but I mean, you certainly felt like an expat when you were there, and it's a very special experience.
Absolutely. I was reading, James Baldwin, Giovanni's Room, books set in Paris, and then also Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda Fitzgerald's work, because to really feel like that American in Paris, you do feel like an expat, but it feels like New York. They're very friendly, just a little brusque, and they all speak French.
Yeah, it's really an important idea. And we were talking about the gap year earlier. You go to Sciences Po, it's not a gap year. This is like work, wasn't it?
That one, a lot of my friends had fun in their abroads. I was studying, I was taking classes in French. It was grueling, but it was good. It was very, very good.
Well, speaking of France, or at least French food and French heritage, someone who is deeply influenced by all of that is the late Anthony Bourdain. So my reread for this week is Kitchen Confidential, which of course was published back in 2000. It's a brutally honest memoir, takedown really of the restaurant industry from an insider. And because of him, we all learned that you don't order fish on a Monday, you don't eat the bread, you don't eat Sunday buffets. The reason why I picked this book is also because it's the source material for a new movie that's coming out this weekend.
Okay.
It's called Tony. It's a biopic based on Bourdain's early years.
It's getting a buzz.
It's getting a buzz. It's an A24 production. Dominic Sessa is the lead actor, and he actually sounds like Anthony Bourdain. I don't know what he did or what kind of training he did or what kind of research he did, but he sounds like Anthony Bourdain. There's a certain cadence that he achieves.
I've been seeing this book pop up all the time. I was at a bar and I saw a guy reading the book, and I went up to him.
At the bar?
At the bar. Performative reading, if you will, Tom, as we talked about earlier.
It's very much a Bildungsroman. I'm excited about it because it's like the source material for, the early years of Anthony Bourdain.
I mean, I look at this, and within Bloomberg Money, it's loads and loads of parents sending kids abroad. It's an ancient thing. With the David McCullough book, this goes back to the fabric of the nation. What was the biggest, to tie into Scarlet, the biggest food surprise for you? Don't tell me McDonald's in London or that. What was the biggest French food surprise for you in Paris?
What surprised me the most was that food from everywhere can taste good. I feel like sometimes in the US, you stop into any place and the food's not that great. You would go into every single little cafe. The coffee was amazing. The milk was amazing. It was just... That was the worst part, transitioning back, was saying, oh, not every place.
Back to the Starbucks in Ann Arbor, it just didn't work.
It didn't work for me anymore.
Makes a lot of sense. Any baguette anywhere would be incredible, right?
The croque monsieur.
True story, I'm in Davos, Christine Lagarde, we're at some French thing. Lagarde turns to me dead serious. Lagarde, you don't know. Tom, never make jokes about baguettes and bread with the French.
Oh, there's a warning. There's a warning. All right. Julia Fenzeris, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. And of course, for the latest reviews and recommendations from Bloomberg, subscribe to the On Books newsletter. Coming up on Bloomberg Money, the U.S. Open is serving up a good time for fans starting Sunday. There's a week-long fan week. The Honey Deuces. Oh, to die for. We're going to see how much that's all going to cost you.
Are you going?
I'm not going.
I'm not going.
But that's partly because the price tag is
Carol and Tim are going.
Really? Yes. All right. We'll talk about all of that coming up. Where you can spend your money this weekend. Are you going to?
Welcome back to Bloomberg Money. Tom Keene with the Scarlet Foo. It's just been a great hour. And what we do is we look forward.
We look forward to how you're going to spend your money this weekend and in the coming week. And the U.S. Open Fan Week begins this weekend. It runs from Sunday to Saturday. It's Fan Week, but you also have access to what they call like the qualifying matches, the practice sessions. So people like to wander around and check out the talent. The main tournament doesn't begin until next Sunday.
But it's wonderful, and particularly in Midtown Manhattan, you're literally bumping into various people carrying 20 tennis rackets.
Right. I mean, and you're also paying up for the Honey Deuces, which are a big thing. It's a special drink. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I tried one once.
Okay, tried one.
I was
just once,
but I tried it.
Ticket prices for Fan Week have really soared. This used to be relatively affordable, ground passes, but now they're up to as much as $363. So much so that Bill Ackman even complained about it on social media.
There's a lot of complaints this time around, but again, the players are sort of like in a lot of other sports revolting talk about Bloomberg Money. You know what? They're just saying, when do we get the TV pie? When do we get our piece of the action?
Yeah, here's what
here's
Bill
Mr.
Ackman said.
Ackman.
Yeah, he said the idea that a day one ground pass is $363 is absurd. And by the way, he's referring to the secondary price of that ground pass. But, $363 to walk around and check things out, that's kind of pricey.
We got to get Bill Ackman on the show. He'd be great to have on the show.
I think he has a lot of opinions that he'd like to share.
Mr. Ackman, we'd like to get you on here. B and C block. We'll get that done as well. I mean, to me, it's just really, really interesting. We're into the autumn.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Open.
And the U.S. Open. Also this weekend, Shakespeare in the Park. It's the last weekend. Those tickets are free, but very difficult to get.
Very difficult to get, to say the least. Oh, there I was in last year.
The Winter's Tale. That's what's playing this weekend.
I am the worst quoter of Shakespeare east of the Mississippi.
That's okay. This is
Total
Bloomberg Money.
disaster.
We don't need to do Shakespeare.
It's Bloomberg Money. Look for us out on video as well. All of our different interviews. Good afternoon.
You did it. Said good afternoon.
I said good afternoon. It was a triumph.